So we have been in a series called Chosen. And so we're back there again this morning. But let's start out with a story, if I may. In that same year of the 6th grade, what had happened was that they redistricted our schools. And so I lived in Hamilton, all the way over by the Blackstreet Bridge and in that area. And so in the 4th and 5th grade, I was playing baseball. I started playing baseball when I was 10, actually playing organized baseball when I was 10. We were always doing pickup games. And so I got on a team and we were playing out at this area, and it just so happened that it was right next to the school when I got to go to in 6th grade. So I got to know a lot of those kids prior to going there, which kind of helped a little bit, because when you've gone to kids with the same kids at school all your life up through the 5th grade, and then all of a sudden you go to another school for the 6th grade and you're all brand new kids, you're a mess. And part of the mess also came because of social economics. Most of those people had a little bit of money. Not a whole lot, but a little bit. But then there were some like us who didn't have any money. We were poor, but you didn't know what poor was, right? I mean, you had food on the table, clothes to wear. Sometimes the shoes were really ragged because it wasn't your turn to get shoes. So I was one of those guys that was athletic and stuff because I was so thin. I was roughly around that time, I was probably somewhere close to about 5'6", and I probably weighed about 120 pounds, okay? So all of this is legs, and all of this is skin and bones, and the legs were too. It's kind of like chicken legs. So we're getting there, and I had a guy by the name of Mike DeStola, who was our gym teacher. And we were in a cafeteria, okay? So that's where Jim was in the cafeteria. So we were doing this thing one time that basically said you could jump on a, you know what the mini tramps are? Okay, so you would run and jump on the mini tramp, and we would see who could touch the ceiling of the cafeteria. And nobody could do it. And I came really, really close. And so he bet me that I couldn't do it. And I said, okay, you got it, teacher. And so I did. And I thought, wow, now I'm the hit of the class. Because I'm able to do something that they couldn't do. Wrong. You were no longer the head of the class, you now became the butt of the class. Because nobody liked you. Because they thought you were a show-off and the teacher pet. So it came a long time for the Christmas play. The 6th grade was going to put on the Christmas play. The main part of the Christmas play was not Mary and Joseph. The main part of the Christmas play was the innkeeper. And when that play came along, I wanted so much to be the part of that play. Because you have to understand something. I like the tension. I know that's kind of hard to understand. And so I wanted the part of the play. We were trying out, and there was another guy that was really popular with everything. And the teacher was going to let the students pick the person to be the innkeeper. And I thought, man, there is no way am I ever going to do this. So we're all there that day, and the teacher had brought us all together and was going to announce who got the parts in the play. Well, she started down with the smaller parts and building up and building up. And it came down to the last 2 parts. And one was a guy that I know, his name was Harry, and myself. And I was sitting there so nervous because I wanted that part so bad. And when she said that Harry got the second part, and I got the main part of the show, that was one of the proudest moments of my life as a kid growing up. Because what ended up happening was I got to say, there's no room in the inn. But please, can't we stay? Can you read my lips? There's no place in the inn. You're out of here. But you don't understand. I'm going to have a baby. You don't understand. There's no room in the inn. So I became the bad guy. But everybody liked me. And so I became the hit of the 6th grade. And so when we talk about being chosen, it was awesome to be chosen to have that part. And so sometimes as we begin to talk through our sermon this morning, we need to understand some things. So, as we said, for those that haven't been with us the last few weeks, we're in a thing called Chosen. And so, we've been talking about who we are, our identity. Because even in the 6th grade, I had to refine my identity. Because when I was going to school at Madison Elementary, we had a big, huge playground. And one of the great things that we got to play during gym time was kickball. Okay? And I don't know if any of y'all have ever really played kickball where you actually have a lane marked on the blacktop, where there is the person who is going to roll the ball has a place that they have to stand, and then there is a spot there that is kind of like it's actually a lane, okay? And so the ball has to get there, and so you would end up kicking the ball, okay? Well, the thing about it was, where we were at was another part over here, and these are my lifetime stories. Yeah, it's about my identity of who I was. Because what ended up happening was I was the best kickball player in the school with long legs, and I knew how to exactly where to kick that ball. Because most people, when they kick the ball, they kick it off the tip of their foot. You never kick the ball off the tip of your foot. You actually kick the ball here on the top of your foot. Okay? And after a while it gets callous. But I tell you what, you get a lot of lift and you get a lot of speed. And people do not want to stand in front of that ball when it is flying through there. So anyway, it was that, and plus you were allowed to roll the ball, and most people would roll the ball straight. Well, we were allowed to curve the ball like a bowling ball, which made it a little bit more competitive and stuff. And so most of the time they did not like for me to kick the ball because I always kicked the ball over the fence. And so they were saying, you know, why do you keep showing off? But let me say this. If anybody ever had to choose teams, you want to know who was number one chosen? My name was always called. And I could turn my back and go to sleep. That sounds like bragging, doesn't it? But I was a good kickball player. And so it was great to understand that was my identity in the first through fifth grade, and all of a sudden in sixth grade I have to change identity and go. And so we need to know who we are. And so we've really been talking about our identity. So in week number 1, if you remember, we were talking about the fact that we are chosen by God. Number 2, if you remember, we highlighted the truth that once we are chosen by God, we are changed by God. And then last week, if you remember, we were talking about how that we become complete in God. Complete because that's who He's making us. When you begin to start searching for your identity as to who you are, the question is sometimes, how do you relate to other people? How do other people see you as you're chosen? Because if you remember, Jesus died on the cross to make us complete. So today we're going back to 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse number 9. It's where we've been for the longest time, okay? And so we want to go back there again today. And here's what it says. He says, but you are a chosen, which we talked about, right? A chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for His possession, so that you may proclaim the praises of who? The one who called you out of darkness into His marvelous light. So we've talked last week as we were talking about being complete. Now we're going to be talking about called into or out of darkness. And so the question is, does any of you really know what darkness feels like? And most people will say, yeah, because what you think I'm talking about is being in a place where, Mark, can you turn out the lights? Are you up there? All of them? Stage lights too? So how well can you see now? Huh? You need to light the what? Oh, for the camera. Okay, cool. It's only going to happen in a minute. He's going to sign in the dark. But what happens is when we shine a light, right, it begins to brighten things up for us. Agreed? And so we begin to get out of, and you can turn back on. We begin to get out of the darkness. Well, I'm not talking about that darkness. I'm talking about spiritual darkness. What does it really feel like to know that there is no light in your life? Look at what he said. He says, I called you out of darkness So many times what ends up happening is we've been saved for so long that we don't realize what the spiritual darkness is anymore. We can't relate. So when we're trying to talk to people who are non-Christians, and we try to start talking to them about this spiritual darkness, so many times we've been a Christian for so long, we don't even know how to talk to them about spiritual darkness. We don't know how to talk to them about the issues and the problems and the things that they're dealing with, because we're not dealing with those things. We're dealing with, my prayer life stinks. My church life stinks. You know, or I'm not really serving God the way I should be serving God. And we think those are major issues that we have in our life. Yes, as a Christian. But what about the spiritual darkness and the issues that they're dealing with? And this is what God is trying to talk to us. He says, listen, do you not understand what spiritual darkness is? It's total emptiness. Total emptiness, right? It's total brokenness. It's total restlessness. It's total worries. The issues and the problems continue to go on and on and on. And I don't know. You know, I hear people all the time say, well, I'm worried about this. Christians, ladies and gentlemen, we do not worry. We get concerned. Why do we get concerned? Because we can't control the situation. We want control. And God's saying, don't you understand? I've got this. How many of you all have seen the new show, God Friended Me? Huh? A few of you have? Okay, for the rest of you that haven't, if you haven't DVR'd it, let's go back to the first episode. Okay? It's a play on things, but it's okay. It's cool. It's talking about how God could use social media. He's got this guy who does not believe in God at all. He was actually raised in church. His father's a preacher, still is a preacher, and he's coming up on his 25th anniversary there at the church. They're going to be celebrating it. This guy's doing a podcast about how God doesn't exist. Even though he'd been in church, grew up in church, God doesn't exist. And all of a sudden he gets a friend request, and it says, God sent you a friend request. Confirm or delete, and he deletes it. He gets it again, he deletes it. He gets it again, he deletes it. And he finally says, okay, God, I'll accept your friend request. And the next thing you know, God sends him a friend request, and then the next thing you know, he gets a friend request recommended by God for someone else. He says, who is this person? And all of a sudden this guy's walking down the street and he looks and it's that guy. And he deleted it. And then it came back up. He deleted it and came back up and he did it. And he followed the guy and he saved his life because the guy was so miserable. And I'll not tell you the rest of the story. I'll tell you the rest of the story in a minute. But anyway, the guy was so miserable, had a bad day going on. And what did he do? He was going to kill himself. He was going to jump in front of the subway train in New York and going to kill himself. And the guy saved him. And then the next thing you know, the guy goes on about his business, and there's a lady who's a writer having writer's block, and she's about ready to quit and do all of this stuff. And all of a sudden he meets her, because God has sent a friend request and everything else, they're talking and everything else. She gets out of the car coming down the street, she didn't see it, she got hit by the car, and she's laying there unconscious. No pulse, gonna die. Who comes out of the cab 2 cars back? The first guy that he saved. He says, I'm looking for a doctor. He says, I am a doctor. And so he's doing CPR and he saves a girl's life. Okay? And the guy says, who are you? And he says, I'm a doctor. He says, you don't understand. When you saw me in the things that was going on, I just lost a patient on the operating table. And I broke up with my girlfriend or my wife or whatever. I can't remember the rest of that story. But anyway, God had placed these two people together at the right time. That's God. Because so many times we don't understand how much God is in control. That show, you know, sometimes they don't realize what they're doing and what they're saying, but realizing that God will put certain people in your life at certain time, at a certain place, at a certain location for something to occur. I'll share you a story about how Linda and I met. Remember we had the carnival out here? Okay, 6 years ago? 6 years ago, she didn't even live in this area. She was coming to pick up another a lady that you all know, Kimon and Cupcake and them's mother lived over here, and she was coming to pick them up and taking them somewhere else. Driving by, and all of a sudden they see this sign that says Carnival. And so Missy wants to stop with her kids. And so Missy stops. Well, Linda's driving, so Missy stops. She gets out. And most of y'all know Linda. Linda was over in a secluded spot by herself. Totally and completely by herself. And you know me. That's how I met Marlene. Was there. So I met some other people. They were by themselves or some secluded place. And so I go over, and the worst thing that I could ever do was sit down and talk to her. Okay? Because I'm invading her space. And you know, I didn't know who she was. I just know she was somebody that was sitting by themselves over somewhere. And when we're doing the carnivals and we're operating the crowd, nobody's sitting by themselves. We will go search them out. I have no clue what I said to her on that day, but she still remembers the conversation and the one remark that came. She was not going here. She didn't even live here. So what does God do? They're moving. So where does God move them to? Right over here behind the church. This is what I'm saying. God puts people in certain places and certain times in people's lives. He's called us all to do that. And you're going to have those encounters because that's what God's doing. And this is where God is bringing us. So many times what happens is we try to fill our darkness with so many things, thinking that that's going to help us and everything, and it doesn't help us. It makes us go differ. So in 1 Peter chapter 2, in verse number 9, you need to look at something. Look at what it says. Now some people, or some scriptures, some translations will not translate it this way, but this is why I like this translation. Who called you out of darkness into what? Not just light. His marvelous light. Some other translations will translate that word to be amazing. And it absolutely is. So when we understand how marvelous the light is that we've been called into. You see all of these shows, remember how when someone dies, they're always being drawn into the light? Okay? Well, ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you, part of that is correct. Okay? Spiritually, you are dead in darkness, and God is trying to funnel you into His light. And it's not just a light. It's a marvelous light. It's amazing light. The things that He opens up for us to be able to see, the things that He's allowing us to do is absolutely phenomenal sometimes. Amen. We don't realize how much it is. For instance, remember and hopefully hasn't been too long ago. Do you remember a time recently, when you've actually felt very, very close to God? How'd you feel? Did you feel joy? Wow. God, this is amazing. It's been so long since I've had this joy. And God, how close that you brought me. And to thank you for those things. But what we need to understand is this, that when He calls us out of spiritual darkness into the light, His marvelous light, what happens is this: Satan wants to keep us in the darkness. And what ends up happening is, as he continues to try to bring us into the darkness, or back to that point or that thing in a memory or a lapse or whatever that's there, constantly reminding, it seems like, God, I'm slipping here. And God's saying, hold on a minute, I love you. I love you unconditionally. Do you not understand that I have extended my grace and my mercy to you? And in that time frame that I've extended my grace and my mercy to you, there is nothing to be ashamed of. But so many times we're so ashamed of our past, and so ashamed because people are going to pass judgment on us based upon what we used to do. May I say this to you? If people in the church and outside want to pass judgment on you based upon your prior life, let them go ahead. Because at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, it is not them who's going to judge you. It is God who is going to judge you. And let me say this to you, and as far as that prior life, before you came to know God, ladies and gentlemen, He will never bring it up. He doesn't do it. You want to know why? Because He can't remember it. He says, I have cast your sins as far as the east is from the west into the sea of forgetfulness, or as deep as the sea, never to be remembered again. He doesn't bring it up. Satan does, because he wants us to be shameful. And when we start putting this shame upon ourselves, we no longer are experiencing the marvelous light or the awesome light that God is trying to show us. And you're trying to say, where is he going with this? And I'll show you where I'm going with this. Okay? Because what God is doing is He is speaking His truth into us. God cannot lie to you. Satan does. And will continually try to do this. So, remember I was talking about being called? So my question to you is this. Who called you? Huh? God did. It's okay, you can say that. If God called you, how awesome is that? That God Himself called you individually. And this is what I am a firm believer, based on scriptures, and was talking about it this week, about where it says that there is rejoicing, and a lot of people will quote the verse as this: there is rejoicing in heaven when a sinner gets saved. Go back and read that scripture. It says there is rejoicing in heaven in the presence of the angels. in the presence of the angels. And so everybody would say, well, the angels were rejoicing. No, it's in the presence of the angels. Somebody's rejoicing. And do you know the awesomeness of it when God calls your name and you respond? That is absolutely awesome, because you know what? God is proclaiming your name through all of the universe and universes. And God is partying in front of the angels and celebrating because one more soul has been snatched out of the hands of Satan. And God loves to rub it into Satan's face. That's mine. That's mine. You can't have them. That's my child. And to know that I am on God's team and Satan cannot choose me, cannot do, he can abuse me, he can do whatever God allows him to do. But one thing he cannot do is take my soul. That belongs to God. And so the awesomeness is there. And so what Peter says is that you need to, when you come into this, he says, so that what? So that you may proclaim the praises. What did he call us to do? To proclaim the praises of God to those around us. And so when we begin to do this, as a result, what you can show to others, what you can declare to others, is what God has given you. Right? Amen. So here's the second part of this, and that is we are called to show others the goodness of God. We aren't chosen just to come to church and sit here. We aren't chosen to just get up and sing or to pray or to basically read my Bible. We are chosen to go out into the darkness and to share that goodness that God has extended to us to those who are less fortunate. You know how they do these things where it's you got a hungry child. And so they say, this child, if you don't feed them, they're going to starve. And they're always pointing to some other country. And I'm not saying don't feed other countries. I'm not saying any of that. But sometimes there's people right in your doorstep that's hungry. And so many times we go here, we never go there. But do you understand that God has called us to minister to the people here? As I was sharing on Wednesday night, on Tuesday, we are given the opportunity to go into the lives of 77 kids, 6th graders. And there was something, we were there for a training, and they forgot to tell some of the kids that they weren't going to have the program that day. So 4 kids didn't get the message. And so they went over and they talked to him and they said, do you want to go home or do you want to stay here? You know what all 4 of those kids wanted to do? Stay here. They want to go home. Because they know that somebody's going to pay attention to them there. And they've already got things for us, they've already got things laid out for us to do every week. This week, you know what we're going to do with these kids? Play games with them. One, we're going to help them do homework, and I hope and I pray, God, do not let them fail, whoever I'm helping. Amen. Because we were talking about this new math. I can't do it. But you know what? One of the things that we're going to do is we're going to plant tulips. And the tulips, and there's a little sign that goes along with it that says that we're planting tulips to help grow. And as those tulips grow, and we see those grow, it will help to of the kids that we're working with, will help them to achieve their goals. Because a lot of them have no goals. A lot of their decisions is, when can I get out of school? When do I have to stop going? And so the problem is this. It says, we are called, it says, called where? We are called you out of the darkness into the marvelous light. And so when we're called to show the goodness of God, my question is this: where? If he's called us to do something, he's got to call us to do something in some location, someplace. Where is that? Ladies and gentlemen, it's in every aspect of your life. I am a firm believer. If I am a child of God, there is nothing that happens in my life that is a coincidence. Everything in my life is God-driven, God-appointed moment. If there's somebody out here hurting and I come upon them, he wants me to speak to them and speak life into them, speak truth into them. If there's someone just passing the street sometimes, honestly, I know this is difficult for some of you to do. I know that. And sometimes it was difficult for me to do. But one of the things that bothered me more than anything when I was working was I was working with a lot of people that were from the Middle East, okay, India predominantly. And most of the time when they are walking and they see you coming, they will lower their head. And when you speak to them, they will not lift their head to speak to you. Okay? It's almost like a trait or something that's in there. And here's what I'm saying. Sometimes even as Christians, we walk around like this because I don't want to see what's going on around about me. I don't want to see that person over there that's hurting. I don't want to see that person over here that's crying. I don't want to see this person over here that's doing this, or this person over here that's doing that. I don't want to see these things. And if I don't see them, then I'm not aware of it, then God, you can't make me responsible for it. Oh, yes, you can. And sometimes, you know, I hate it when people call it this time when they're calling a church. It's called Satan, okay? And he's got the wrong number. Because we need to understand that he's called us, and what we're to do is we are to show the goodness of God to others. And sometimes we need to do these things. And like I was showing you, what we have become, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to turn out the lights, okay? But you know what we are? We're not a little flashlight that just you get on your keychain, okay, to show a little blip in the darkness. What God is trying to tell us, that do you know what you are? You are a big stinking lighthouse. You're there so that in the darkness it will penetrate that darkness and bring others to you, because they're looking for something. They're looking for safety. They're out in the deep. They're out in the waters. They're out there where the rocks are at. And they're about ready to collide with those rocks. And they don't know where the rocks are at. But ladies and gentlemen, we do know where the rocks are at. We've been there. We know what it's like. Some will know what it's like to be addicted to drugs, alcohol. Some will know what it's like to be addicted to pornography. Some will know what it's like to be addicted to stealing or lying or cheating. Or some will know what it's like to be addicted to anything and everything. And there's people out there that are looking for help in these places. And they're looking for someone to come up to them and give them a word. And the problem is the words won't just cut it. They want to seek counseling. Counseling is great in certain areas and certain things, but let me say this to you, counseling will not save you. Amen. Unless you go to the right counselor. And his name is Jesus. And let me say this to you, he's still got his shingle hanging out there. And I hear people all the time say, what's his office hours? His office hours are anytime. Anytime. You mean to tell me that he works 24/7? Absolutely. When can I talk to him? Whenever you want to. I have people all the time say, oh, do I have to come to church on Sunday to get saved? No, you want to do it right here? Let's go for it. Amen. Wherever. Because why? We're called to be that light to those people. Because why? We know where the rocks are. We've been there. Or we're there. And God's bringing them into our light sometimes to even show us what we need to do. And so what we need to do is, as Christians, we need to quit annoying people. And we need to show them kindness. There's a big difference. God did not call us to walk around and carry a big stick and condemn everybody with the stick or the Bible. Let me say this to you. It isn't your words that will bring them to Jesus. It is the Word of God spoken by the direction of the Holy Spirit bidding that will draw. Jesus never said, Chuck, if you be lifted up, you can draw them to you. I think the scripture said, Jesus said, if I be lifted up, I'll draw all men to me. And sometimes we need to understand we're called. And let me say this to you as we finish today. How are we called? I hear people all the time say, how are we called? Do you understand that God called you by name? It is awesome how God can take a congregation, and I don't care how large this congregation is, it could be a mega church with 20,000 people in it. And do you know that God could go through and call each one of them by name at the same time? Amen. That's an awesome God. He called you specifically. He wasn't talking to your neighbor, he's talking to you. He may have been talking to your neighbor too, but he's talking to you. We need to quit being concerned about, oh, I wish that God would speak to this person. No, let God speak to me and speak through me. Let me be the one, because let me say this to you, that day when I was there in the 6th grade, and I'm getting so nervous, weighing who's going to call my name. It's been those times when she called my name, and she says, back then it was Charlie, okay? When she said, Charlie Cotton, she says, you got the lead part. I said, me, Mrs. Eberth? I got that part? She says, yes, you got the part. And I said, you're kidding me. I got the part? She says, yeah, do you think you can do it? I says, oh yeah, I can speak real well with my southern drawl. I'll be a southern innkeeper. But she gave me the part. She became, you know, I can only tell you 2 teachers that I've had in my whole time in school, except for high school. I can tell you a couple of them. But in elementary school, I can tell you I had a teacher, Mrs. Armstrong. Actually, three teachers. Mrs. Sugar had her 2 straight years, and that's when I got my glasses. Because I had her in 3rd grade and 4th grade, and when I came, and the reason I remember that was because I was in 3rd grade, and she says, can you see the board? And I said, oh yeah, I can see the board. And she says, okay. And she says, well, everybody write this down. And I'm writing something down, and so after class, she says, you need to take this to your parents, this note. And I thought, man, I'm in trouble big time. And you know how, as kids, notes never got home to the parents without you reading them. We knew how to reseal You know, you learn those things. But anyway, she just said I needed that. So I remember her, Mrs. Armstrong, and I remember Mrs. Armstrong in 5th grade at Madison. And the reason I remember that is because my brother and my sister both had her. You didn't have her, did you, after that?
No, I was probably reform school.
But it was awesome because she called me by name. And you know what it is? How awesome it is to be called by God by name. Called by Him to show His goodness to everybody else. That's a strong responsibility. It is awesome to say, you've chosen me to do that? Me? Yeah, I've chosen them all, but I've chosen you too. And to be able to, at the end of the day, to hear Him say, well done. Well done. I told you, I played sports a lot. First year that I played in baseball, remember I told you the guy, Harry? Okay. The way I met Harry was I began to start playing baseball when I was 10 years old. He was a left-hander, okay? And when I was playing, the first year I played 10, at the age of 10, you know the first position that I got to play? Right field. I first started playing right field. Right field is where back then you would stick the worst kid on the team, okay? And I really didn't think I was the worst kid on the team. And so I had to prove to them that I was not the worst kid on the team. By the end of the year, I had played every position but catcher. We get into the city tournament, and I'd been pitching, and then all of a sudden, we're here in the finals of the tournament, and I'm getting to pitch as a 10-year-old. Well, you want to know why? Harry went on vacation. And I never forgot that. And when I got to the 6th grade and 2 years later, I hadn't forgotten that, but Harry had. And I had to remind him, remember, you were the one that got picked over me when we were 10. Now I'm 12. And then I got picked over you. But let me say this to you. That was then. And this is now. I am so glad that God picks us all. Not one above the other. He gives us each a job to do. We are chosen to do that job. We are called to do that job. You're not called to do anybody else's job. You're called to do your job. And this is why God equips you to do your job. Don't want to do somebody else's. God will equip you to move you into certain areas that He wants you to go. But right now, what God is equipping you to do is to share the goodness of Him to others. That is our main task. And the question is, are you doing what you're chosen to do, ladies and gentlemen? When's the last time you showed the goodness of God to others? We were talking, and I'm glad I did not talk to your dad about this when we were talking. He never had MSNBC or CNN on when I came into the room. And I never did mention Trump to him. But you know what? We have become so divided on our politics, on our beliefs of so many things that now we no longer communicate to each other. We yell at each other. And what God is saying is, listen, as a Christian, share my goodness to people. Share my love. Because that's what they need. They don't need all of this other stuff. They need this. And that's what He's called us to do.
Hello, this is Pastor Chuck Cotton from Calvary Baptist Church. First of all, I'd like to say thank you very much for taking the time out to either listen to our sermon or to watch it on video. We are grateful that you've actually taken the time and hope and pray that it has been a blessing to you as it was to us as we delivered it to our congregation. We ask if you have any questions whatsoever that you email us at pastorchuck@calvarybaptistmiddletown.org, or you could come in and give us a phone call, if you would please, at area code 513-423-7251. I'd like to take this opportunity to also invite you to come to our church and visit us, if you would please. We actually have small groups on Sunday morning starting at 9:30, with our morning worship following at 10:45. Prior to our morning small groups, we also provide donuts with coffee, milk, orange juice, a time for fellowship, get to know each other, have a good time before we actually break out into our small groups for Sunday. Our worship services are uplifting, they're fast moving, and everything in our service is just a fast pace. But we do take time every once in a while to slow down as we feel the Holy Spirit moving, and we never want to hinder it in any way. We also have on Sunday evening, and during the school year, we have Awana, and Awana starts with the Puggles, actually from age 2 all the way up through high school. And during that period of time, we also have a worship service. Both of these start at 6 o'clock and end at 7:30. Our Wednesday night, we have a Bible study, which starts at 7. We generally finish about 8:15. We would love for you to come and visit with us. Don't have to dress up. Just come as you are, because to us, it doesn't matter. You're a child of God, a creation of His, and so to us, you're important to everything that we do. Our motto here is building the kingdom one life at a time, and we hope that we have a chance to visit with you, get to know you as you get to know us. So thank you, and may God bless you.